Hey everybody, I'm making a video on the Scan My Tesla app. The Scan My Tesla app, it uses an OBD adapter that connects to a dongle cable that you can connect into your service port underneath your main screen of your Tesla vehicle. Or at least that's where it is on my Model S. If you have any problems locating it, let me know and I can upload another video and show you right where it's at. Keep in mind that when you're looking for these adapter cables to go from the OBD2 port or adapter to the diag port in your car, they are very specific to the model and definitely to the model year. Like the Model S, between mine's a 2014 and then like a Model X that's a 2016. I met a guy the other day that wanted to kind of see into his battery pack details. So I offered to meet him to be able to plug in my cable to scan his car, and the adapter did not work. So he's having to order one. But let's get into it. So you'll see, the main option underneath the menu bar in the top left-hand corner. The first item that you'll get is the dashboard screen. And you'll see the dashboard screen. The first one will tell you your SOC, which is your state of charge. And right now my car is sitting at a 50% state of charge. The next two are if your car has a front motor, mine does not. Mine is just a rear-wheel drive Model S. But if you had a front motor and you were engaging the vehicle, it would show you how much power was being delivered to that front motor, same with the back motor. And then you can see this battery's 0 kilowatt. That'd be the total amount of kilowatts coming off of the battery to fuel those two motors. You'll see at the bottom of the screen, it's kind of a split screen with two different dashboards sitting there. And the top one will tell you, the front motor and rear motor, the kilowatts that are being consumed. And then the next screen down, you'll see your front torque, rear torque. So if I was driving the vehicle, those would be, you'd be seeing them moving up and down and stuff as the torque is being delivered. But since I'm parked, you're not seeing anything there. The next two dashboards is you'll see the high voltage battery. You'll see how many volts that high voltage battery is delivering. So mine right now is 258.8 or 9. And one thing about the Scan My Tesla is it's very fast, right? It's very responsive. The OBD port is very responsive. And so those numbers kind of flicker around really fast. I don't know if it's worth, the developer slowing that down or, for me, it's nice to see it as fast as it's going because then it gives me a more real-time fill than if he did a millisecond wait time or something between each one of them. But maybe some people would like that. I don't know. But you'll see down below right now I'm using between 100 watts and 200 watts. So you'll see kilowatt and it's between 0.1 and 0.2. Which would be, 100 watts or 200 watts. So looking down at the next two screens, or next two dashboard, well, it's single dashboard with two different readouts, right? But you'll see the DC to DC converter is outputting between 14.1 and 14.2 volts. And those volts are being fed into my 12-volt battery, which is maintaining the MCU of the car, both of the displays, any other sort of diagnostics, anything else that's going on with the car. But you'll see at the bottom, the 12-volt system is outputting 140 watts. And the DC to DC converter is providing 14.1 volts. So if you do the volts times the amperage, then you'll get to the wattage. But yeah, you'll see those two on that screen. So the next screen will give you your battery coolant temperature. And so my car's sitting in my garage, which is awfully warm, but you'll see the cells you'll see the battery coolant reading underneath. You'll see the cells are sitting at 92.4 Fahrenheit, and then the inlet is 94.1 Fahrenheit. And I'll show you in a second how you can go in and change that reading from Fahrenheit to Celsius, kilometers, miles. You can turn those. He's done an excellent job, or the developer has, of giving you just a toggle option to switch those on and off. But you'll see the heating target is 46.4 Fahrenheit. So if the battery gets below that temperature, it'll turn on the battery heater. And then if the battery gets above 125.6 degrees, then it will turn on the air conditioning, and the air conditioning will do a bypass process to where it'll bypass the cabin and will directly cool the coolant that goes against the battery pack. The next two you'll see is the outside temperature, which is the inside temperature of my garage, is 87.8 degrees. But on the main display, it actually shows as 88. So when Tesla presents it to you, it will round up the number to the nearest whole. So now you have the next screen down, your powertrain coolant. So you have that also read in Fahrenheit, and you'll see right now that it's reading at 91.8. And the target for the coolant is 104 degrees up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, this next one is kind of what was most important to me. It's probably the most important to everybody else too. But you'll see that this is your battery pack capacity. So my car is an 85 kilowatt battery, and the 85 kilowatt batteries were originally an 81 kilowatt battery, and then they hold back, I believe it's 5 kilowatts that you cannot charge your car into it. You don't have any access to that capacity of the battery. So you can never charge in that 5 kilowatt buffer. It's to kind of preserve the battery so that you're never really charging it to 100%. It also helps to maintain the life of the battery. It's much less likely to have a fire because, the 5 kilowatt holdback on an 81 kilowatt battery, you're 7-8%. I should have done the math before saying that, but you can, if it's 8% of the battery pack you can't charge into, then truly when you charge your car at 100%, you're really only ever charging it to 92. And so that helps to preserve the life of your battery, because pretty much if you keep in mind the 20s are where the battery degrades, and a lot of that is dependent based on the temperature that the battery's sitting at. The hotter battery is, the more it's going to degrade, below 20% and above 80%. So as you could see above, I always just keep my battery charged at 50% state of charge. And you'll see at the top, now we have an error to unplug and replug in the OBD adapter. So I will do as instructed and unplug it and plug it back in. But you'll see on that capacity screen, the kilowatt hour of my battery, was originally an 81. They do the 5 kilowatt holdback, which would push me down to like a 75 kilowatts. And then what I have currently available to me is 71.4 kilowatts if I charge my car to 100%. And right now I'm charged at 50%, which means, I have about 33.7, you'll see on the bottom, is usable, how much of the power I can actually use of the pack. But the pack itself has 37.7 kilowatts available. And with that buffer I talked about on the top end, where you can't charge the battery to 100%, nor will Tesla let you drain the battery to 0%. So you'll see that there's a buffer on that screen, a 4 kilowatt buffer. So, so it's kind of interesting, right? So my battery has 37 kilowatts of power sitting in it right now, but there's a 4 kilowatt buffer that I'm not allowed to use because you could brick your battery or damage it, right, if you take it all the way down to truly 0%. And so I can, of the 37.7 that my battery has in it, Tesla reserves 4 kilowatts that I can't ever use on the bottom end, so I can only use 33.7 while driving the car. And then, because they do the 5 kilowatt kind of hold back or reserve at the top of the battery to where I can never charge all the way to the top, my battery pack goes from, sold as an 85, but really was an 81. And then Tesla holds back the 5 kilowatts, which takes it down to 76. And then I'm not allowed to use that 4 kilowatt buffer, which drops it from 76 down to a 72 kilowatts that I can actually use. And of this, the 72 is in a brand new pack, whereas in mine, you'd normally have a 75. I've lost, 4.6 kilowatts of my battery just through it degrading over 106,000 miles in 7 years. So I'm down to a 71 available. And of the 71, I can't use 4 of those. So I'm down to like a 67 kilowatt pack. So, some of these older cars, when you're comparing, like an 85 kilowatt to a 75 kilowatt pack, sometimes there isn't that much of a difference because those 75 kilowatt packs are newer. And so they actually can have as much, if not more, power in them than an 85 pack. So if you're going to buy one, buy this adapter, buy the OBD2 adapter, right? Or the diag cable and the OBD2 adapter, plug it in, see what that pack actually looks like. Because now you can actually see it. And I actually went to a dealership the other day to buy a Model X, and they knew nothing about it. All they knew was it was a Model X. So, and it was a 5-seater, so I didn't end up buying it because I really want to get a 6 or a 7-seater so I can get rid of a minivan. Anyway, so that was kind of a tangent. Sorry about that. So you have your kilowatt capacity. So we've, gone through that at quite a level. Then down below it, you'll have the range. And the range right now is saying that I have a 140 mile range. And at the same time that I'm talking through this, I'm going to the display on my car. I'm switching it to distance. And the car is reading out 121 mile range. So Scan My Tesla must be showing the ideal range and not the rated range. And when I switch it over to ideal, it does read 140 miles. And I'll show you in a second that within those settings, you can also toggle this back between ideal and rated range. And always go off a rated range if you have it set on range. I just always set mine for percent, and for me it's a lot mentally healthier just to look at percent instead of trying to always sweat about the miles that you're actually getting. So this next one, this is it's calculated amp hour capacity. And so you'll see it's actually not filling out right now. It was populated the other day. So I have this app because I'm a beta tester. I have not bought this app yet, and I need to, right? I get a lot of use out of it, but I kind of like having the beta access to it because then I can see the newest features that are going to come out before they're out. But it would also be good to, support the developer. But I'm also giving him, free QA time. So that is definitely, supporting him. And he, I wouldn't hurt my feelings if he sent me a free copy or anything like that. But anyway, so on the CAC, the calculated amp hour capacity, it's not filling in the chart. I'm going to let him know. But you'll see right below it actually is talking about the imbalance. And the imbalance is between the different battery packs that are sitting in the battery, and you'll see that the imbalance between all those packs is 10 millivolts, which is pretty minimal. So you'll see the brick voltages, right? And so the minimum brick voltage is 3.732 volts, and then the highest pack is 3.742. So the difference between the minimum pack and the top pack as far as charge rate or charge level, right? Where the battery's sitting at on the charge that the cells have. It's a 10 millivolt difference between the two. Okay, so those are all of the default dashboards that you're given, right out of the box. So you can go to that menu option, and then this, I really love this next option, which is actually, I'm going to go into the settings first before I go to the signal lists. So I'm going to skip down to the third item. So on the settings, if you remember, as we looked through the different items, we were looking at miles, we were looking at Fahrenheit. I don't believe we looked at foot-pounds. And I could have sworn he had an ideal versus rated option in here, but I am not seeing it. So I'll actually give him that feedback and see if he wants to make that change to the app to give people an option to toggle between ideal and rated on the range, because the ideal is you're not going to hit it. You're lucky to hit rated. But anyway, the top one is whether you're going through your OBD adapter is a Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. The one that I got, the OBD Link MX Plus, it is a Bluetooth adapter, so I have it set on Bluetooth. Then the next option you'll see between a Model 3 or a Model Y or Model S and X. And mine is a Model S, so it needs to be toggled onto that side. And then the next one is show the front motor. You can turn this off. I don't have a front motor, so I have it turned off. And then the next option is if you go into your car and you can see which firmware you're currently on. If you click on, at least in mine, in a Model S, in the bottom left-hand corner, you have a car icon. If you click on the car icon, it will bring up your menu. And on the menu, if you click on software, it will tell you which version of the software you're on. And right now I'm on V11, which is 2022 8.10. And so you'll see that this toggle is between, a build from the year 2020 and, where we're at now. So if you've upgraded your car in the last 2 years, you're going to be on the newest firmware. So you'll need to select that after 2020.20.5. Next option is miles or kilometers. I have mine set to miles. Celsius versus Fahrenheit. I'm in the States, so I set it to Fahrenheit. Same thing with Newton meters versus foot pounds. I am in the US, so I use foot pounds. And then the next one is debug, whether you want debug on or off. For that is, I'm not sure what code he's writing this in, but you can put statements inside of your code that actually throw, you can just write like, it's called a sysout in Java, which is what I program in, but you can just send things to console or you can send things to a log file. And when you have debug on, those log statements are ran when they're normally kind of ignored, and you won't see any of those debug items. So I'll actually turn, debug info on, and we'll see, as we go through the signal list, whatever he has in there that, are throwing out messages when debug is enabled. So now we'll go over to the signal list. Now the signal list is pretty cool. So you'll see, the top one is all about the OBD adapter, how many packets it's sending per second, and packets that's an encapsulation of data that's sent as a part of a programming in computers, right? I don't know that that might be too much information for a lot of people, but if he's trying to debug a problem with the app and the packets per second is 5 or 10, then he knows that whatever OBD adapter you're using is way too slow for his application to be able to read, because you can see right now it's in the mid 200s. So let me look. So we're going to go down a little bit. The top three you probably don't care about. We have that CAC that we were talking about earlier. The minimum break ID is 95. The top break ID is 11. And then that's where he was reading the voltage off of that, to where I had a 10 millivolt difference between my highest charged pack and my lowest charged pack. So next one is your DC to DC coolant. Like, it's 96.8 degrees Fahrenheit. The battery current, it's currently pushing out between 0.5 and 0.6 amps. The outside temperature, we're down to an 86.9 degrees. It is really warm in here. I don't know what the difference is between the outside temp and outside temp filtered. They're both reading the same, so I'm not exactly sure on that. The inside temp is inside of the passenger compartment, so if I had the AC running, it'd be cooling the car off, but it's not, because that amount of noise going onto the microphone would make this video just not pleasant. Then the AC air temperature. So if the AC was running, this would tell you what the temperature was. So if you have an issue where you can't get your passenger compartment to cool off, you could use those readouts to see, what is my AC unit believe the temperature is actually running at, right? So if it says that your AC is running at 30 degrees, but you put your hand on the vent and the temperature's coming out hot, well, that tells you the module that's reading the AC temperature is faulty. So you need to replace it so that it's reading the right temperature, because that temperature is going to decide whether it's going to, be running the air conditioning compressor right to cool the air off. So great information, right? Great troubleshooting details in here to where you can troubleshoot your system based on what all of these sensors are reading. So yeah, I really love this app. He's done an amazing job with it. So here's your refrigerant temperature. So your refrigerant temperature is 84 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you have your heater. So you have a left heater and a right heater. So if the driver's side in the winter is really warm and the passenger side is really cold, you can see if, do these sensors agree? If the sensors are, the passenger side's blowing out cold, the driver's side's blowing out hot in the winter, and you look in the app and both of them say that they should be blowing hot, once again, that's another sensor that you could replace and hopefully restore your system. Now, if it's reading, during the winter, you're trying to set it to 80 degrees, the driver's side is reading 80, the passenger side is reading 30 degrees, well, then it might be your heater core has gone out, right? So it just helps you be able to troubleshoot it. So then you can see your vent. The mid vent left is 86.9, mid vent right is 86.7. Your floor vents, both of those are reading at 86 degrees for me. Here's your HVAC temps and your 400 volt system. Like it's pushing out, 0.02 kilowatts. The battery voltage, 359 volts. Your DC to DC efficiency. This one's always kind of interesting to me, that when you're going from the high voltage battery pack and it's doing the DC to DC converter to push it down to your 12 volt battery, which is what runs the computer, you're truly operating at like an 80% efficiency. So you're losing 20% of your power between your high voltage battery pack and your 12 volt battery just through the DC to DC conversion. Luckily, that system doesn't use a whole lot of power. As you could see above, or maybe it was on one of the other screens, it was roughly, 240 watts, something like that. So you'd have to drive the car for 4 hours to consume 1 kilowatt. But even the 1 kilowatt at the 4 hours, you've truly consumed 1.2 kilowatts because of that efficiency loss, to where you're losing 20% of it. The next two are your state of charge and state of charge expected. So the car believes that it's 50%. The state of charge minimum is 55%. The state of charge in the UI is 52.8. And then series or parallels at 100%. Then the next two, and you could, I don't know if it's going to pick it up in the video or not, but you have the battery coolant pumps or heating pumps, right? It's just pumping the coolant through the system. So those two pumps are currently operating at 23%. So if you use this app when you go to the superchargers and you're plugged in and you're supercharging, and maybe I should make a video of that, but if you're plugged in, you will hear your AC crank up to cool those batteries as they're being supercharged. And as a part of that is these pumps will go to 100% because they're trying to move that coolant as fast as it can across those battery cells. So it's kind of cool to watch how your car reacts to AC charging versus the supercharging. You'll notice a difference in these battery pumps. You also notice that the air conditioning will kick on when you're supercharging. Will start cooling the battery pack. So right now you'll see, like radiator bypass, it's 100% bypass, cooler or chiller, it's 100%. You'll see that if your battery's getting hot, that chiller bypass will change, because instead of cooling the passenger compartment, it will start cooling the battery pack itself. Coolant heater, if it was cold and we needed to warm up the antifreeze to warm the battery cells, you'll see that, what percentage of that battery heater. And another great troubleshooting point, right? If your battery is having a hard time in the winter, you can go in and see, is my coolant heater having a problem? because if it's 32 degrees outside and you are now starting to drive your car and the battery heater sitting at 30 or 40%, you might have a problem with that heater, right? Because it should be cranking up to close to 100% to warm up the coolant, to warm up the battery pack, because you don't want to draw power off of a frozen pack, because that will degrade the pack too. So you have a couple of more settings, like the louvers. If you're running the air conditioner, those louvers, those are at the front of the car, and those are what open up to drive air over the radiators to cool off the car. Okay, we'll skip down through there. You'll see the regen percent. I have mine set to high regen, so 27.9%. A couple of more HVAC settings. Here is one, your DC to DC current. Here's your CAC again. Once again, 212 amp hours. So that's interesting. So it's actually showing you the feed on this screen, but yet on the other dashboard, it never populated that screen. So while you have the reading here, for some reason it's not populating on the dashboard. And I'll also give that feedback as a part of the beta testing. Okay, so now we're down to coolant heater inlet. It's 93.7 degrees. The battery inlet's 94 degrees. Powertrain. Here's a couple of items. And we could go through all of these, but at some point it's ad nauseum, right? Here's your distance as far as the miles on the vehicle. So you can see 106 miles, 106.3 miles. Here we go. Yeah, so rated versus ideal. So he's getting both of them in the signal list, but on the dashboard it's actually using the ideal. But I'll still, give the feedback. Maybe he wants to have a toggle to where you can toggle between rated versus ideal. But that's, looking in the car, that's exactly what the car says, right? So my full rated range, I'm at 240 miles on this pack. Originally it was 265, I believe. So I've lost, 25 miles off of the original battery pack, so about 8% degrading on the car after 7 years and 106,000 miles. So not too bad. Your ideal range, and your ideal, it's, as I was saying earlier, it's not really that obtainable unless you're driving 40 or 50 miles an hour. You're just not going to get it. So your odometer, battery power, 180 watts right now, and most of that is being fed off of that DC to DC converter, right? So you have your 12 volt lead acid battery that's being fed by your high voltage battery that you're sitting on top of, that goes through a DC to DC converter that takes it from the 400 volt system down to the 12 volt system. So you'll see the next two, your 400 volt and 12 volt. So max. Okay. So here you go. So this one, based on my state of charge that I'm at right now, which is a 50% state of charge, if I punch the accelerator as hard as I can draw up to 329 kilowatts off of that battery. And that's against, my large induction rear motor. The next one's kind of cool to know too is your max charge rate. A lot of people will go to a supercharger and they complain that their car is only charging at 50 or 60 kilowatts. But if the battery's cold, it's not going to charge very fast. So you can actually, as you're navigating, you can select the supercharger you want to go to, and then the car will start to precondition. And if you're watching this max charge, while it's preconditioning, you'll see it just start stepping up. As that battery's getting warmer and warmer, it can accept more of a charge. So my car, 2014 S85, right now, the max charge that it could receive through DC fast charging is 93.7 kilowatts based on a 50% state of charge. So nominal full pack, right? This is a great thing. If you're buying a used car, get this app, right, and look at these details. But like right now, my pack can take at the most 71.4 kilowatts of power. Because I'm 50% charged with that reserve, I can draw the 37.6 kilowatts. Okay, so going through a couple of these. Yeah, there's your energy buffer, that 4 kilowatt at the bottom of the battery to keep the battery from turning into a massive brick. So there's your usable, right? So ideal is 37, but what I can actually use is 33.6. So at 100% charge, 66 or 67.2 kilowatts, right? So some of those 75 packs now actually have more energy in them than what I have. Now this next one, this is the amazing statistics that you can look at the battery too, because a lot of people have a concern of, how much was this car DC charged versus AC charged. So for my car, it's had 7,000 kilowatts of high-speed DC charging, either supercharging or change demo charging, but 7,000 kilowatts of those two. Of the AC charging, it's had 31,162 kilowatts of charging into it. And then this regenerative charging, meaning when you're driving the car, you let your foot off of the accelerator, then the car will automatically start to brake or regenerate the power. So instead of using physical braking, it uses the motor to brake the car. And by doing so, it generates electricity, which goes back into the pack. So 13,000 kilowatts of power have been regenerated by just letting off the accelerator and not pushing the brake, right? Letting the car slow itself and regenerate that power, which is how a hybrid car works, right? Just an EV is that on steroids. But almost twice as many kilowatt hours have gone into this pack through regenerative braking than through DC charging. And then, 2.5 times that on AC charging. So a massive amount of power going back into the car just by regenerating. So next one, your energy is 35,000 kilowatts. The total discharge is 49,000 kilowatts. So the 49,000 would be, your DC charging, AC charging, regenerative charging, right? All of those going together. Plus, it's not going to add up perfectly because the discharge isn't always going to match. Yeah, so there you go. There's the next two. So you have discharge. I need to find out for sure, but I believe that one is for like driving the vehicle. And then your total charge is 51,000 kilowatts. The difference between the 49 and the 51 is kind of your parasitic loss through the car, sitting there and sending information up to Tesla and all that kind of stuff, right? Where you're not actually driving the car. So there again is your DC charging again. So that's listed twice. So DC charging total is 7,000 kilowatts. AC 31, charge total 51, and discharge total 49,000. Then your regen again. So then it has that cell imbalance, which is your 11 millivolts, which came off of the other dashboards. And then you have your DC to DC again, your 14 volts, your cell min, cell max, cell average, and then the difference between the cells. And then here you go, your DC to DC input power. Right now the car is being driven off of 160 watts. And then my last trip, which was, I went from, I don't know how much elevation change I had, but quite a bit. I usually I'm in about the 270 to 290 watts per mile, but I had gone kind of up in elevation, so it had consumed a lot more power. And your biggest things there, oddly enough, are your tires. So make sure if you're ever buying tires for your car, go for a low roll resisting tire, because the higher the rolling resistance is, the higher your watts per mile. Also, the larger your rim is, the higher your watts per mile. So for my car, it's got 19-inch rims. They also have a 21-inch, and the 21-inch uses 50 watts per mile more than the 19-inch. So while the 21s look nice, 50 watts per mile, for me, I'm usually 250 to, 300 at the most. So you'll get between a fifth and a sixth more range on your vehicle by having a smaller rim. But it's not as pretty. But I would rather drive my car further than have the most pretty car out there. So here you go. Here's the discharge cycles. So we've had 689 discharge cycles, 727 charge cycles. The HVAC fan speed is 0. It's getting warm in here. And then the last cell block updated as it's going through, looking at all the different cell blocks. And then the next one is a list of all of the cell temperatures. You can see they're all, between 93 and 92 degrees. And then all of your cell voltages. And up above, you could see the differential between the highest charge cell, lowest charge cell, and the differences between the two. But this actually gives you the information. So if you have, a high disparity between them, like if one of them's 2.5 volts and the other one's 3.7 volts, then you can actually look at this list and it would tell you which of those cells is having a problem. So people, some of the third parties now will actually go in and try to diagnose exactly which cell's gone out on a pack so they can restore the pack. Gruber Motors is one of them that does that. But having the data, and they're going to have their own apps to do it, but, Scan My Tesla gives you all of that data so you can kind of diagnose it yourself. So if you have a problem with the pack, you could actually go in and say, I see cell 70, for instance, voltage is reading at 2.5 volts. Maybe that's a problem. And then Tesla could help you out. Okay, so that's going through all of those lists. You can also, up at the top, you'll see a drop down that says all. And I should have gone over this at first, sorry about that. But you'll see all, and then you can actually go in and say, which one do I want to look at? And then it switches over to more of a dashboard view. So you have your performance, your battery voltage, right? You have your speed, which I'm not driving, so there isn't any speed right now. You have all of your temperatures, right? It kind of gives kind of the cooler readout where you see the bar graph going across the side. Let me click on that again. And then your HVAC, if you want to go back to your battery, there's your battery information. Your BMS, your battery management software. Oh, that's kind of nice. I really like that where you can see, as they dive in on the lower voltages. But even, your bar graph, it looks, quite large of a difference between all of them. But as you look down, it's, 0.001 difference, right, is showing a large bar difference. But it's because they're so close, right? But here's your totals. And then your lights miscellaneous. And I don't have any lights on or anything like that because I'm just parked into my garage. So yeah, so that battery screen is really nice to look at. Okay, so we'll go back up to the menu item. So we've gone through dashboards, signal lists, the settings. You can go look at the welcome page. He shows you that OBD adapter that I have. And then you'll see in the, about a third of the way up on the screen, on the right-hand side, there's a link to a shop where you can go buy that adapter. And then on the left-hand side, he gives you three different options to buy that adapter cable. And then he kind of walks you through how to customize each of those screens. So then about Scan My Tesla. Oh, did I not do? I guess a welcome page and the about. Oh, makes sense. Yeah, they're the same. And then you can exit out of them. I really like his, V underneath the Teslas. He's done really well with that icon. So yeah, so that is the Scan My Tesla app. I really love this app. I think he's done an amazing job with it. Especially those signal lists as you go into the filter, right? You can get rid of quite a bit of the noise and be able to drill down on anything that you're specifically curious about with the battery. So hopefully that was helpful. If you found it to be helpful, let me know. If not, let me know anything else you'd like me to cover. Feel free to comment. And thanks so much for watching.